Outstanding British film is always one of my favourite categories, actually, at the BAFTAs, and I think this is a really fascinating one because Under the Shadow has been nominated, which isn't, of course, an English language film, but it's by Babak Anvari, who is a British-Iranian director, and a horror as well, which is always quite fun to see in this category. Would you agree?
Yeah, and we should note that it was our entry for the Oscars, the foreign language Oscars. Unfortunately, didn't make the shortlist, which I thought was scandalous. It was a great film. I thought it was a great horror movie, as per se, brilliantly directed.
It was a feminist movie.
Feminist movie. It was about war. It was about kind of the role of women in that. It made me jump when the toaster popped. It had the shocks like that, which always get me, but it also had a lot more depth to it as well.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was one of the great kind of discoveries of the year, and congratulations to Babak.
Yeah. I thought Under the Shadow was great as well, but it's interesting what sticks in people's minds as a British film, because obviously American Honey is there, and American Honey is a movie I absolutely loved. Andrea Arnold, of course, is a product of Greenwich and Gravesend, you know, but it's a movie about Americana. It's, again, another feminist movie. I thought American Honey was remarkable because I think to go over and to be able to reach out for non-professional actors, a bunch of kids, and to be able, that's what Andrea's so great at. It's the lyricism and the poetry of what she actually puts on camera, and it's also the performances that she draws out of these kids, who are often literally just kids off the street.
Certainly soundtrack of the year. I mean, the music in American Honey was great.
A friend of mine said to me, and I just captured it perfectly, said it genuinely made me remember what being 15 was like. And part of that is what the music means to you, how it feels to you. So when they're all singing along on the bus, you think, of course, that's what being a teenager is.
Exactly. Someone came out of the Cannes screening and said, oh, that movie made me feel so old. And I thought, that's a tragedy. It made me feel young. I want to run away and join the circus.
We also have a huge blockbuster in this category as well, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, starring Eddie Redmayne, who, you know, obviously is a BAFTA darling. But do you think that this is worthy of a BAFTA this year?
I didn't have any problem with Fantastic Beasts. As a family film, I thought it worked brilliantly. I took my son to it, who's 11 years old. He had a good time to it when he wasn't quite expecting to. He thought he was going to be a bit too old for it, and then it actually sort of worked its charms on him. Once you start grouping films by nationality, you end up with these weird juxtapositions. Yeah. So it's strange to talk about Under the Shadow and American Honey and then talk about Fantastic Beasts.
Which does have that British stamp, I think.
It absolutely does.
But it's set in New York, but shot here on a soundstage that looks like New York. I mean, we had Skyfall winning for Outstanding British Film before. We do reward blockbusters. My feeling is that Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them hasn't found its groove quite yet. I didn't quite get what there were those beasts and they escape, and then there's some other stuff going on. I like.
It was quite political in the end, wasn't it?
It wasn't quite so. I didn't know who it was quite for. It sort of went over my head. I didn't mind. It looked great. I think there's a better film coming some way down the Niffler's pouch.
I mean, what seems strange to me is the very idea that in this year of all years, any British film could win Outstanding British Film that isn't I, Daniel Blake, because it said so much about Britain, and because also I think more than any of the films, possibly even including Fantastic Beasts, it had this reach where it connected with audiences up and down the country. If you put me into a corner and said, which is your favourite British film of the year, I would probably end up saying American Honey, but I, Daniel Blake, it feels like it has to win.
What about Notes on Blindness, though? That's incredibly popular at the moment.
It is. I mean, it's great because it's a little documentary. It's a film that I'm sure most people hadn't seen, and I hope its nomination in this category of Outstanding British Film leads people to kind of chase it. It's an outstanding piece of cinematic recreation of what it's like to be blind, the academic John Hull and his audio recordings. It's done on a no budget, really, and it came from a short by the makers, Peter Middleton and James Spinney. So it's tremendously creative. It's so moving as a film. I mean, I absolutely love it, I have to say, and I'm delighted that it's in this category. I don't think it'll win just because, again, Daniel Blake probably does more, and I even think that the makers themselves will probably say, you know, fair dues. But I'm really glad to see it nominated. I think it's a really excellent nomination for the membership.
Denial is a film that we haven't really talked about yet, and that's about Holocaust denier David Irving taking a Jewish lecturer to court over whether the Holocaust ever happened or not, Deborah Lipstadt, who's played by Rachel Weisz. And this I found really quite fascinating because, you know, we have seen many films about the Holocaust before, but this sort of took the emotion out of it and just, you know, made it into a courtroom drama, which is almost unthinkable that it's a true story.
Yeah, it's interesting you say we haven't spoken about it because you'd have thought, well, Rachel Weisz playing Deborah Lipstadt, there's a shoe-in for Best Actress. Tim Spall played David Irving, which he does brilliantly. There's a shoe-in for supporting actor. These sort of, they're missing. Somehow, things are missing from this very well-intentioned film about an extremely important episode in British legal Jewish history. It's out on Holocaust Memorial Day to remind us all that.
They had to prove that the Holocaust happened.
They had to prove it happened, but they didn't want to use Deborah Lipstadt. Doesn't get her moment in court. That belongs to Tom Wilkinson playing Richard Rampton QC. The Holocaust survivors don't get their moment in court because David Irving would make mincemeat of them. So it's a film that denies itself all the way up, which I found fascinating, yet sort of kind of mitigates the drama of it somewhat, which is probably why we haven't spoken to it. I'm pleased it got nominated for Outstanding British Film because it's an outstanding British event, but it isn't a movie that's caught the imagination, which I think is a real shame. I'm a bit worried that there's a sort of self-importance that has overtaken this movie where the drama should be.
There's something a little off about Dhillon. I can't quite work out what it is because it is such a valuable story, such an important story. But I think if you were coming to the story without any idea of who David Irving and Deborah Lipstadt were, I think you would be puzzled why we're telling this story now. It seems like a film driven by filmmakers thinking, it's an interesting story, we should do that, rather than it really coming out of their gut. It just doesn't quite. There are good things in it. I don't think it quite stacks up.
I think Denial is a fantastic movie, but I think it's going to take a hell of a lot to beat I, Daniel Blake. Join us on the 12th of February to find out who the winner will be.